My son said I was too old, too slow, and too much of a burden. Then, without my consent, he moved me into a nursing home and took over my house like I was already gone. But I wasn't weak, and I wasn't finished. While he was busy living in my home, I was planning something of my own, something he'd remember every time he walked through that front door. This is how I made my son regret the day he called his own mother a burden. Ryan Carter stood in my kitchen that Tuesday morning and told me I was getting too old to live alone. He said I was becoming forgetful and that I needed professional care. I told him I was fine, that I had just turned 73 and could still manage everything myself. He didn't listen. His wife Clara stood behind him with her arms crossed. She had that look on her face, the one she always wore when she wanted something. Ryan said they had already found a place for me, a nursing home about 40 minutes away. He said it was clean and comfortable, that I would make friends there. I asked him why he didn't talk to me first. He said he did, but I don't remember any conversation like that. They packed my things while I sat on the couch. I watched them put my clothes in suitcases, my photos in boxes. They moved quickly, like they had been planning this for weeks. When I asked to stay, Ryan said it was already decided. He said the room was paid for and waiting. Clara told me I should be grateful they found such a nice place. The drive to the nursing home was quiet. I sat in the back seat and looked out the window. We passed the grocery store where I had shopped for 40 years. We passed the church where I married my husband David. We passed the park where I used to take Ryan when he was small. I thought about all those years, all those moments. I wondered how we ended up here. The nursing home smelled like cleaning products and cooked vegetables. A woman at the front desk smiled and asked for my name. Ryan signed papers while I stood there. Nobody asked me to sign anything. Nobody asked me if I agreed. A nurse took me to a small room with a bed, a chair, and a window that looked out at a parking lot. Ryan and Clara said goodbye. Clara hugged me quickly. Ryan said he would visit soon. Then they left. I sat on the bed and looked around the room. My whole life had just been reduced to this space. I thought about my house, the one David and I bought in 1978. I thought about the garden I planted, the rooms I painted, the memories in every corner. That house was mine. I had paid for it with money I earned working 2 jobs after David died. I had raised Ryan there by myself. I had survived cancer in that house. Now Ryan and Clara had the keys, and I was here. The first week was the worst. I had no phone because Ryan said I kept losing it. I had no visitors because Ryan said he was too busy with work. I had no way to contact anyone. Asked the staff if I could use their phone. They said residents needed permission from family members to make calls. I realized then that I was trapped. I started paying attention to everything. I noticed the other residents, how some of them seemed confused and others seemed perfectly aware. I noticed the staff, how they treated us like children. I noticed that some families visited often and others never came at all. I watched and I listened, and I started to understand what had happened to me. At night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in that narrow bed and thought about Ryan. I remembered the day he was born, how small he was, how I promised to protect him. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, helping him with homework, driving him to baseball practice. I remembered working double shifts so he could go to college. I remembered selling my wedding ring when he needed money for his first apartment. I had given him everything. Now he had taken everything from me. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't sick. I was angry. And anger, I learned, can be useful. It can wake you up. It can make you see clearly. It can give you strength when you thought you had none left. Asked a nurse for paper and a pen. She brought me a small notebook and a blue pen. I started writing. I wrote down the date Ryan brought me here. I wrote down what he said, what Clara said, how they moved my things. I wrote down the name of the nursing home, the address, the phone number. I wrote down the names of the staff who seemed kind. I wrote down everything I could remember about my lawyer, Martha Reeves, who had helped me with my will years ago. Every day, I added more notes. I wrote down times, dates, conversations. I wrote down the name of my bank, my account numbers, my address. I wrote down the names of neighbors who might remember me. I was building something, though I didn't know yet what it would become. 3 weeks after Ryan left me there, a woman named Joyce moved into the room next to mine. She was younger than me, maybe 65. We started eating meals together. She told me her daughter had put her in the nursing home after her husband died. She said her daughter wanted to sell her house and keep the money. I told her my story. We sat there in the cafeteria, 2 women who had been thrown away by the children we raised. Joyce said she had talked to a lawyer. She said there were laws about this, laws that protected people like us. She said if someone takes your house without permission, that's theft. If someone signs papers in your name, that's fraud. She said I should fight back. I thought about that all night. Fight back. Could I? I was 73 years old, stuck in a nursing home with no phone and no money. Ryan had everything. He had my house, my belongings, probably my bank accounts too. What could I do? But then I remembered something David used to say. He said the only time you've really lost is when you stop trying. I had survived a lot of hard things in my life. I had survived losing David. I had survived cancer. I had survived poverty and loneliness and fear. I could survive this too. The next morning, I asked to speak to the nursing home director. Her name was Linda Chen. I told her I needed to make a phone call to my lawyer. She asked if my son knew about this. I said it didn't matter, that I had a right to legal counsel. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number. She handed me the receiver. I called information and got Martha Reeves's office number. When Martha answered, I almost cried. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said 4 words that changed everything. Eleanor, I'm coming today. Martha arrived at the nursing home 3 hours after my phone call. I watched from my window as she got out of her car. She looked the same as I remembered, tall and serious with gray hair pulled back tight. She carried a leather briefcase and walked with purpose. I felt hope for the first time in weeks. Linda Chen brought her to my room. Martha sat down in the chair next to my bed and opened her briefcase. She pulled out a legal pad and a pen. She looked at me and said we had a lot of work to do. I showed her my notebook with all the dates and details. She nodded as she read through it. She said I had done exactly the right thing by keeping records. Martha asked me questions for over an hour. Did I ever sign a power of attorney giving Ryan control over my finances?
No.
Did I ever agree to move to a nursing home?
No.
Did I ever say Ryan could live in my house?
No.
She wrote everything down. Then she asked if I was willing to fight this legally. I said yes, without hesitation. She explained what had probably happened. Ryan had likely forged my signature on documents giving him power of attorney. He had used those fake documents to access my bank accounts and change the locks on my house. He had told the nursing home that I had dementia or some other condition that made me unable to make decisions. All of this was illegal. All of it could be reversed. But first, Martha said, we needed proof that I was mentally competent. She arranged for a doctor to evaluate me. Dr. Samuel Morrison came to the nursing home the next day. He was a psychiatrist who specialized in evaluating mental capacity. He asked me questions about current events, about my personal history, about my ability to manage money and make decisions. The evaluation took 2 hours. At the end, he wrote a report stating that I showed no signs of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity. He said I was fully capable of managing my own affairs. With that report in hand, Martha filed an emergency motion with the court. She asked the judge to immediately revoke any power of attorney documents Ryan had used. She asked for a temporary restraining order preventing Ryan from accessing my bank accounts. She asked for an order allowing me to return to my house. She filed everything on a Thursday afternoon. On Friday morning, Martha called me at the nursing home. The judge had granted our emergency motion. All powers of attorney were revoked. My bank accounts were frozen, so Ryan couldn't take any more money. And I was legally allowed to return home immediately. Martha said she would pick me up that afternoon. I packed my small suitcase with shaking hands. I said goodbye to Joyce. I told her to call Martha if she wanted help too. Then I walked out of that nursing home with Martha at my side. The fresh air hit my face, and I realized I had barely been outside in a month. I got into Martha's car, and we drove away. But we didn't go to my house. Martha explained that Ryan was still living there, and we couldn't force him out without another court order. That would take time. Instead, she drove me to a small furnished apartment she had rented for me. It was temporary, she said, just until we sorted everything out. The apartment was small but clean. It had a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a living room with a couch and a television. Martha had even stocked the refrigerator with basic groceries. I stood in the middle of that apartment and felt overwhelming relief. I had my own space again. I had my freedom. I had my voice back. Martha sat down with me and explained the next steps. She would file a lawsuit against Ryan for fraud, elder abuse, and theft. She would demand that he vacate my house immediately. She would seek to recover any money he had taken from my accounts. And she would make sure he could never do this to me again. I asked her how much this would cost.
She said not to worry about it right now.
We would figure out payment once we recovered my assets. I started to cry. Martha handed me a tissue and told me I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired and angry and scared. But I also felt determined. The next day, Martha had legal papers delivered to Ryan at my house. The papers notified him that his power of attorney was revoked, that he was being sued, and that he needed to appear in court. I wasn't there when he got the papers, but Martha told me later that he had been served by a sheriff's deputy. There was no way for him to ignore what was happening now. Ryan called Martha's office that afternoon. He was shouting so loud that Martha put the phone on speaker so I could hear. He said I was crazy, that I was being manipulated, that I would regret this. Martha calmly told him that if he had any legal defense, he could present it in court. Then she hung up. I sat there feeling strange. Part of me was hurt that my son was so angry. But another part of me felt strong. I wasn't backing down. A few days later, Clara sent me a message on Facebook. I still had access to my account through the tablet at my apartment. She wrote a long message saying I was tearing the family apart. She said Ryan had only been trying to help me. She said I was being selfish and cruel. She said I would die alone and regretted. I read the message 3 times. Then I wrote back just one sentence. I am taking back what was stolen from me. Then I blocked her. Martha filed more paperwork. She petitioned the court for a forced sale of my house. Since the house was in my name only and Ryan had no legal right to live there, the judge could order him to leave and the house to be sold. The money from the sale would go to me. It was the fastest way to get Ryan out and recover my assets.
Ryan fought back.
He hired a lawyer who filed papers claiming that I had given Ryan permission to live in the house. He claimed I had verbally agreed to everything. But he had no proof. No signed documents, no witnesses, nothing. His lawyer tried to argue that I was too old to manage my own affairs, but Dr. Morrison's evaluation proved otherwise. The judge was not impressed with Ryan's defense. 2 weeks after Martha filed the petition, the judge ordered the house to be put up for sale. Ryan had 30 days to move out. Martha hired a real estate agent who specialized in quick sales. The agent came to see me at my apartment and showed me photos of my house. I almost didn't recognize it. Ryan and Clara had changed things, painted walls, rearranged furniture. But it was still my house. The house David and I had built our life in. The agent said the house would sell quickly. It was in a good neighborhood and priced fairly. She was right. Within a week, we had 3 offers. One was from a young couple who had just gotten married. They wrote a letter saying they loved the garden and wanted to start their family there. I chose their offer. It felt right to have a family living there again, a family that would take care of it. The sale went through fast because they paid cash. 23 days after the judge's order, the house sold. Ryan moved out on the last possible day. I wasn't there to see him leave, but the real estate agent told me he looked defeated. All his furniture was loaded into a moving truck. Clara wasn't with him. The agent said he left alone. When the sale closed, Martha deposited the money into a new bank account she had opened for me. It was a substantial amount. Enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to make my own choices. I sat in my apartment and looked at the bank statement. After everything I had won, I had my money, my freedom, and my dignity back. Ryan had nothing. I stayed in the furnished apartment for 3 more weeks while Martha helped me decide what to do next. I could have bought another house anywhere. I could have moved to a different city, started fresh where nobody knew what had happened. But I didn't want to run away. I wanted to live my life on my terms, right where I was. Then something unexpected happened. Martha called me one morning and said there was a house for sale on the same street where I used to live. In fact, it was right next door to my old house. The owner had passed away, and the family wanted to sell quickly. Martha asked if I wanted to see it. We drove over that afternoon. The house was smaller than my old one, but well-maintained. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room with big windows. The backyard had a fence separating it from my old house next door. I could see my old garden from the back window. I could see the porch where David and I used to sit in the evenings. I walked through every room of this new house and felt something click into place. I told Martha I wanted to buy it. She asked if I was sure. She reminded me that Ryan was living next door, that it might be uncomfortable. I said I didn't care. This was my neighborhood. These were my streets. I wasn't going to let Ryan's presence drive me away from a place I loved. Besides, I thought, maybe it was time for Ryan to feel uncomfortable instead of me. The purchase went through quickly. I paid cash from the money I got from selling my old house. Within 2 weeks, I owned the house next door to where my son was living. I hired movers to bring my belongings out of storage. I bought new furniture to fill the spaces. I painted the walls colors I liked. I made it mine. The day I moved in, I saw Ryan's face in his window. He was staring at the moving truck in disbelief. I didn't wave. I just went about my business. The movers brought in boxes and furniture while I directed them where to put everything. I planted myself firmly in my new home, and I wasn't going anywhere. That first night, I sat on my new couch and realized what I had done. I had bought the house right next to my son. The son who had betrayed me. The son who had stolen from me. We would see each other regularly now. We would pass each other on the street. We would be neighbors.
Part of me wondered if this was a mistake.
But another part of me felt satisfaction. Ryan had tried to hide me away. Now he would see me every single day. He would be reminded constantly of what he had done. I spent the next few days settling in. I unpacked boxes and arranged my things. I hung photos on the walls, photos of David and me from years ago. I set up my kitchen and cooked my first meal. I made the house feel like home. And every time I looked out the window and saw my old house next door, I felt both sadness and strength. Sadness for what I had lost. Strength for what I had gained back. A few days after I moved in, I decided to work on the yard. The previous owner had let it go, and the garden beds were full of weeds. I put on my gardening gloves and went outside with my tools. I was kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds, when I heard a car door slam. I looked up and saw Ryan getting out of his car.
He was staring at me.
Our eyes met across the fence. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something. I turned back to my weeds and kept working. I heard his footsteps, then his front door closing. He went inside without speaking. That became our pattern. We would see each other, but not speak. He would get his mail while I was watering my plants. I would be leaving for the store while he was coming home from work. We existed in the same space, but in separate worlds. I decided to plant roses along the fence between our properties. I chose bright red ones, the kind that bloom all summer. I called them my line of peace in my own mind. Not because there was peace between Ryan and me, but because I was at peace with my choices. Every time I looked at those roses, I would remember that I had survived. I had fought back. I had won. Clara never came back. I heard from a neighbor that she had filed for divorce. Apparently, the stress of the legal battle and the embarrassment of living next door to me was too much for her. She moved out while I was still in the furnished apartment. Ryan was living in my old house alone now. Sometimes I would see him through the windows. He looked thinner, more tired. He would stand in the kitchen where I used to cook meals for him. He would sit in the living room where we used to watch television together. I wondered what he thought about, if he had any regrets.
But I didn't ask.
We didn't talk. The silence between us was thick and permanent. One Saturday afternoon, I was planting tulip bulbs in my front yard when a car pulled up. I looked up and saw my grandson Ethan getting out. He was 16 now, tall and lean with Ryan's dark hair and my late husband's eyes. He stood on the sidewalk looking nervous. I put down my gardening trowel and stood up. Ethan walked toward me slowly. He stopped a few feet away and said hello. His voice cracked a little. I said hello back. We stood there for a moment, grandmother and grandson, with years of silence between us. Then Ethan said he was sorry. He said he didn't know what his father had done until recently. He said he wanted to see me, to talk to me, to know me again. I opened my arms and he walked into them. He was so much bigger than the last time I held him, but he still felt like my grandson. We hugged on my front lawn while Ryan watched from his window next door. When we pulled apart, Ethan had tears in his eyes. I invited him inside. We sat at my kitchen table and talked for 2 hours. Ethan told me everything. He said his parents had told him I was sick and couldn't have visitors. He said they told him the nursing home was for my own good. He said he believed them until he overheard Clara on the phone talking about the house sale. That's when he started asking questions. That's when he learned the truth. Ethan said he confronted Ryan about it. They had a huge fight. Ethan called his father a thief and a liar. Ryan told him to stay out of adult business. But Ethan wouldn't let it go. He said he was old enough to know right from wrong. And what his father did was wrong. After Clara left, things got worse between Ethan and Ryan. They barely spoke now. Ethan said he wanted to spend time with me instead. From that day on, Ethan visited me regularly. He came over after school and on weekends. We cooked dinner together. We watched old movies. We talked about everything, his school, his friends, his dreams for the future. He helped me in the garden and with small repairs around the house. Having him there filled something in me that had been empty for a long time. Ryan didn't like it. I could see him watching from his windows when Ethan's car was in my driveway. Sometimes Ethan would tell me that his father asked where he was going. Ethan would say he was going to see his grandmother. Ryan would get quiet and angry. But he couldn't stop Ethan from visiting me. Ethan was almost an adult, and he made his own choices. One evening, Ethan and I were sitting on my back porch watching the sunset. The roses along the fence were in full bloom. Ethan said he was proud of me. He said most people wouldn't have fought back the way I did. He said I was strong. I told him that strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you find when you have no other choice. I told him I hope he never has to be that strong, but if he does, I hope he remembers his grandmother who refused to disappear. Living next door to Ryan was strange, but also revealing. I could see his life unraveling from my kitchen window. The grass in his yard started growing too long. The garbage bins would sit at the curb for days after pickup. His car would be gone at odd hours and return late at night.
I didn't feel sorry for him. I just observed.
Ethan told me his father wasn't doing well. Ryan had taken time off from work during a legal battle, and when he went back, his boss wasn't happy about the disruption. Ryan was a project manager at a construction company, and apparently the drama had affected his performance. Ethan said there were talks about demotion. I listened but didn't comment. Ryan's work problems were his own doing. About 6 weeks after I moved in next door, I heard shouting late one night. The walls between our houses were thin enough that loud voices carried. I recognized Ryan's voice and Clara's voice. She had come back, but not to stay. They were arguing about money, about the divorce, about who got what. The argument lasted nearly an hour. Then I heard a car start and drive away. Clara didn't come back after that night. The next morning, I saw Ryan leaving for work. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, and he forgot to close his garage door. He sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. I was watering my roses and pretended not to notice. When he finally drove away, I could see the exhaustion in his posture. The weight he was carrying was visible even from a distance. My neighbor started talking to me more. The Hendersons 2 houses down invited me for coffee. The Patels across the street brought me homemade curry. They all knew what had happened, or at least they knew parts of it. Small towns talk, and this neighborhood had been my home for decades. People remembered me. They remembered David. They knew I wasn't the kind of person who caused trouble without reason. Mrs. Henderson asked me directly one afternoon. She said she had seen the moving trucks and the for sale signs. She said she knew something had happened between Ryan and me. I told her the basic truth. I said Ryan had put me in a nursing home against my will and tried to take my house. I said I fought back legally and won. Her face changed as I spoke. She reached across her kitchen table and squeezed my hand. She said she was glad I was back home where I belonged. Word spread quickly after that. I didn't gossip or tell everyone the details, but the truth has a way of coming out. People started looking at Ryan differently. When he got his mail, neighbors who used to wave would turn away. When he left for work, people would go inside their houses. The community was making its judgment, and it wasn't in Ryan's favor. One Saturday, I was working in my front garden when Mr. Patel came over. He's a retired engineer, quiet and thoughtful. He told me he had heard about what Ryan did. He said his own mother had been mistreated by his brother years ago in India, and they had to fight legally to protect her. He said he respected what I had done. He said standing up to family is the hardest kind of bravery. Then he helped me plant the rest of my flowers without being asked. Ethan continued visiting me regularly. He would come over 3 or 4 times a week. We fell into comfortable routines. Tuesday nights we watched cooking shows and tried new recipes. Thursdays he helped me with yard work. Sundays we went to church together. Having him around made the house feel warm and alive. It reminded me why I fought so hard to stay in this neighborhood. Ryan tried to talk to Ethan about visiting me. Ethan told me about these conversations. Ryan said I was manipulating Ethan, turning him against his own father. Ryan said I was bitter and vengeful. Ethan didn't agree. He told his father that I never spoke badly about Ryan. I never tried to turn Ethan against anyone. I just welcomed him into my home and treated him with love. That was all. One night, Ethan stayed late helping me fix a leaky faucet in my kitchen. It was almost 10 o'clock when we finished. As he was leaving, Ryan was outside getting something from his car. Father and son stood in the driveway between our houses. I watched from my kitchen window. Ryan said something. Ethan shook his head. Ryan's voice got louder. Ethan turned and walked to his car. Ryan stood there alone as Ethan drove away. The next day, Ryan's car was still in the driveway at noon. That was unusual because he always left for work by 7. I was sweeping my front porch when I saw him come outside. He looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. We stared at each other across the property line. Neither of us spoke. After a long moment, he went back inside. Something in his expression looked broken. Ethan came over that afternoon and told me Ryan had been fired from his job. Apparently, the distraction and poor performance had been building up for months. His boss finally let him go. Ryan was home now because he had nowhere else to be. Ethan said his father was angry and depressed. He was drinking more. He was making bad decisions. I felt a small pang of something, maybe not sympathy, but acknowledgement. I knew what it felt like to lose everything. But Ryan had done this to himself. I told Ethan that his father's problems were not his fault. I said Ryan made choices, and now he had to live with them. I said Ethan should focus on his own life, his own future. Ethan nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. No matter what Ryan had done, Ethan still loved his father. That's the complicated part of family. Love doesn't just disappear even when it should. A few days later, I noticed a for sale sign in front of Ryan's house. My old house. The house I sold. The house that Ryan had been living in but couldn't afford anymore. The circle was closing. I called Martha and told her about the sign. She said it made sense. Without a job and with divorce costs piling up, Ryan probably couldn't keep up with rent or buy the house himself. He was being forced out just like he had forced me out. I didn't feel joy at seeing that sign. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt tired. All of this fighting, all of this pain, it had cost everyone something. But I also knew I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be erased. If that made Ryan's life harder, that was his consequence to bear, not mine. The house sold within 3 weeks. A young family bought it, just like the family I chose when I sold it the first time. They had 2 small children and a dog. I watched them move in on a Saturday morning. The kids ran around the yard laughing. The mother directed the movers with a big smile. The father carried boxes and looked happy. It was how a home should feel. Ryan moved out the day before the new family moved in. I didn't see where he went. Ethan told me later that Ryan had rented a small apartment on the other side of town. He took only what he could fit in his car and a small trailer. Everything else he left behind or sold. He left my old house empty and quiet. Then he drove away. After Ryan left, the neighborhood felt lighter. The tension that had hung in the air was gone. I could work in my garden without feeling watched. I could sit on my porch without seeing his car in the driveway. The new family next door was friendly. They introduced themselves and brought over cookies. Their children played in the yard where Ryan used to park his car. Life moved forward. But Ethan was struggling. He told me he felt caught between his father and me. He said he loved us both but didn't know how to balance it. I told him he didn't have to choose. I said his father would always be his father and I would always be his grandmother. What happened between Ryan and me didn't change Ethan's relationship with either of us. He could love us both. He could forgive his father while also supporting me. Family is complicated that way. One evening, about 2 months after Ryan moved out, Ethan and I were making dinner together. He was chopping vegetables while I seasoned chicken. He asked me if I ever thought about forgiving his father. I stopped what I was doing and thought about that question. Forgiveness is tricky, I said. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen. It means letting go of the anger, so it doesn't poison you. I said I was working on it, but I wasn't there yet. Ethan nodded. He said his father asked about me sometimes. He asked if I was doing okay, if I needed anything. I found that surprising. I asked Ethan what he told his father. Ethan said he told him the truth. He said I was doing great. I was happy. I was thriving. And I think that was probably the hardest thing for Ryan to hear. Winter came and went. Spring arrived and brought new life to my garden. The roses bloomed again. The tulips pushed through the soil. I spent my mornings working in the yard and my afternoons reading or cooking. Ethan visited regularly and brought his girlfriend Sarah to meet me. She was a sweet girl, studying to be a teacher. They sat at my kitchen table and talked about their plans. I listened and felt grateful to be included in his life. The new family next door, the Johnsons, became good friends. Emily Johnson worked as a nurse, and her husband Tom taught high school. Their kids, Maya and Lucas, would sometimes come over to help me in the garden. I taught Maya how to plant seeds and showed Lucas how to identify different birds that visited our yards. It felt good to have children around again, to hear their laughter, to feel useful. One afternoon, Emily came over for coffee. We sat on my back porch watching the kids play. She asked me about what had happened with my son. She had heard bits and pieces from other neighbors, but wanted to know the real story. I told her everything. I told her about the nursing home, the legal battle buying this house. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she had tears in her eyes. Emily told me she worked in elder care and had seen situations like mine before. She said families sometimes made terrible choices out of convenience or greed. She said what I did by fighting back was important. She said a lot of older people don't have the resources or strength to stand up for themselves. She asked if I had ever thought about sharing my story more publicly. I hadn't really considered it before. That conversation stayed with me. I thought about all the people in nursing homes who were put there against their will. I thought about Joyce, my friend from the nursing home who helped me understand I could fight back. I wondered how many others were still trapped, still voiceless. Maybe there was something I could do to help. I called Martha and asked her about elder advocacy groups. She gave me contact information for several organizations. I called one called Senior Rights Alliance and spoke with a woman named Patricia. I told her my story and asked how I could help others in similar situations. Patricia invited me to come speak at one of their monthly meetings. The meeting was held at a community center. About 30 people attended, mostly older adults and a few social workers. I stood at the front of the room and told my story from beginning to end. I told them about Ryan, the nursing home, the legal fight, buying the house next door. I talked about keeping records, finding a good lawyer, and refusing to give up. When I finished, several people came up to thank me. One woman was crying. She said her daughter was trying to do the same thing to her. I gave her Martha's phone number. After that meeting, Patricia asked if I would be willing to speak at other events. She said hearing from someone who successfully fought back gave people hope and practical information. I agreed. Over the next few months, I spoke at churches, community centers, and senior living facilities. I shared my story and answered questions. I learned that my experience was far from unique. Elder abuse was more common than I had realized. One day, I received a letter in the mail from a woman named Helen. She had heard me speak at a church event. She wrote that her son had put her in a nursing home and was trying to sell her house. She didn't know what to do. She felt helpless and alone. I called her immediately. We talked for over an hour. I told her about my lawyer, about keeping records, about not giving up. She cried on the phone and said she thought she was the only one this had happened to. I told her she wasn't alone. Helen ended up fighting back with help from Martha. It took 6 months, but she got her house back and her son faced criminal charges for fraud. Helen called me after it was over to say thank you. She said I had given her the courage to stand up for herself. That phone call meant more to me than she could know. It meant my pain had purpose. It meant what I went through could help others avoid the same fate. I started writing articles for local papers about elder abuse and financial exploitation. I wrote about warning signs and how to protect yourself. I wrote about the importance of having a good lawyer and keeping detailed records. The articles were published, and people started recognizing me around town. Some thanked me. Others shared their own stories. I became known as the grandmother who fought back and won. One afternoon, Ethan came over with surprising news. He said he had talked to his father. Ryan had asked about me and what I was doing. When Ethan told him about my speaking engagements and advocacy work, Ryan had gone quiet. Then he said something that surprised Ethan. He said he was ashamed of what he had done. He said watching me help other people made him realize how badly he had hurt me. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me felt vindicated.
Part of me felt sad.
Ryan's shame didn't undo what happened, but it was something. It was an acknowledgement. I told Ethan I appreciated him telling me, but I wasn't ready to have contact with Ryan yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Ethan understood. Around this time, I started thinking about my financial situation differently. The money from selling my house was sitting in the bank earning interest. I had more than enough to live on for the rest of my life. I started thinking about what I wanted to do with that money after I was gone. I thought about Ethan and his future. I thought about the people I had helped through my advocacy work. I thought about creating something that would last beyond my lifetime. I called Martha and told her I wanted to set up a charitable fund. I wanted to help older women who were facing financial abuse or exploitation. I wanted to provide money for legal fees, temporary housing, and other necessities for women fighting back against family members who tried to take advantage of them. Martha thought it was an excellent idea. She helped me establish the Brooks Legacy Fund and donated $50,000 as the initial funding. The fund started small but grew as word spread. Other people donated. Local businesses contributed. The Senior Rights Alliance helped administer the grants. In the first year, we helped 12 women escape bad situations and fight for their rights. Each one of them reminded me of myself sitting in that nursing home room, feeling trapped and hopeless. Now, they had a way out. One of the women we helped was named Dorothy. She was 81, and her nephew had convinced her to sign over her house. He promised to take care of her, but instead tried to put her in a state facility and sell her property. With money from the Brooks Legacy Fund, Dorothy hired a lawyer and got her house back. She sent me a thank you card with a photo of her standing in front of her home. She looked proud and free. I put that photo on my refrigerator. My life had become full in ways I never expected. I had my house, my garden, my grandson, my advocacy work, and my charitable fund. I had purpose and meaning. The pain of what Ryan did would always be part of my story, but it wasn't the whole story anymore. I had taken something terrible and turned it into something useful. That felt like the best kind of victory. Ethan graduated from high school that spring. He had been accepted to the state university to study business. He wanted to help people create financial security and avoid the kinds of problems his father had created. I was so proud of him. At his graduation party, which he insisted on having in my house, he gave a speech. He talked about resilience and learning from mistakes. He talked about his grandmother, who taught him that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. He looked right at me when he said it. I cried happy tears. Summer arrived and brought long, warm days. I spent mornings in the garden and evenings on the porch. The Johnsons next door had become like family. We shared meals and watched each other's houses when someone traveled. The neighborhood felt solid and safe. I felt rooted in a way I hadn't felt since before David died. I had built something here, something good and lasting. One evening in late July, I was sitting on my porch reading when a car pulled up. I looked up and saw Ryan getting out. My heart started beating faster. We hadn't spoken in over a year. He walked slowly at my driveway and stopped at the bottom of my porch steps. He looked older, grayer, thinner. His eyes were tired but clear. He asked if he could talk to me. I put my book down and nodded. He didn't come up on the porch. He stayed on the driveway. He said he had been going to therapy and working on himself. He said he understood now what he had done to me. He said he was ashamed and sorry. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know he had changed. He was working again in a different field and trying to be a better person. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I was quiet for a long time. Then I said thank you for the apology. I said I wasn't ready to have a relationship with him again, but I appreciated him taking responsibility. I said maybe someday we could talk more, but not yet. He nodded like he expected that answer. He said he understood. Then he got back in his car and drove away. After he left, I sat on my porch for a long time thinking. Forgiveness is complicated. It's not a switch you flip. It's a process, a journey. I wasn't sure where that journey would lead with Ryan. Maybe we would eventually rebuild something. Maybe we wouldn't. But I knew one thing for certain. I was okay either way. My happiness didn't depend on Ryan anymore. My life was full without him in it. That realization felt like freedom. As I sat there in the quiet, I realized something important. I was no longer defined by what was done to me. I was defined by what I did next. Ryan tried to make me disappear. Instead, I became visible in ways I never imagined. He tried to silence me. Instead, I found my voice and used it to help others. He tried to take my power. Instead, I claimed more power than I ever had before. I was not the burden they tried to bury. I was the woman who rose from that grave and lived fully. I was the grandmother who fought back and won. I was the voice for those who felt voiceless. I was the proof that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. I was Eleanor Brooks, and I was proud of every choice I made after the day my son betrayed me. My story didn't end in that nursing home. It began there. And the chapters one wrote after that day were the most important of my life. I lived on my terms. I helped people who needed help. I changed laws that protected vulnerable adults. I built a legacy that would outlast me. And most importantly, I proved to myself that I was strong enough to survive anything. As I turned off the Christmas tree lights and headed to bed, I felt satisfied with my life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. There were more women to help, more stories to tell, more changes to make. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful to be here, in my home, living freely. That was enough. That was everything.